what's going on, guys? Welcome to the channel. I'm Ben. This is my Tenere 700, and I've got to get this video filmed quick because my dad is literally on his way to pick this bike up. Now, if you guys want to know why it is that I decided to sell this bike to him, I will eventually be doing a video on why I decided to part ways with this machine. I do absolutely love it, and I'm so excited that it's going to him. But before he picks it up, I figured I would go through everything that I've done to it and kind of give you guys an idea of how I feel about the mods that I've done to this bike. So we'll kind of start from the ground up. Actually, even before I picked this bike up, I had the dealership put on these Motaz Tractionators. So these have about 5,000 miles on them, I think 4,900, something like that. These have been absolutely great tires. Front is starting to cup just a little bit. I think the back actually is in, maybe I wouldn't say excellent shape, but I mean there's still a good amount of meat left on there. Obviously a pretty aggressive tire when brand new. Absolutely love these. And these are the Tractionator Adventures. The front is a 90-90-21. The rear is going to be a 150-70-18. Then I've got heavy duty tubes in these. And the reason that I decided to stick these on before I ever even took the bike off of the showroom floor is because I knew I wasn't going to have my Dirt Rex crash bars, which are both the front and the back here from Dirt Rex, which is a kind of a smaller company made up in Canada. So really cool. Definitely a great company to support. But the reason I put the aggressive tires on here right away is because I knew I wasn't going to have these bars yet, because when I picked this bike up, this was actually one of the first ones that came to the US, so I knew I wouldn't be able to get crash bars for it right away. And I did not trust the stock tires on here. The stock Pirellis look a lot like the 804, 805 big blocks from Shinko, and I've ridden them on those tires before. Thought they were okay when I used them, and the Pirellis are even less aggressive than those, but you just don't have as much kind of lateral traction, and obviously you just don't have near as much traction as these are going to. So that's why I went with those. Definitely happy with them. Maybe a little bit vibey and possibly noisy compared to what you're used to on the highway, but still a great tire for taking corners and everything. You just obviously got to remember that you're on knobbies. Definitely highly recommend those. So as I should mention, I did stick these little Tusk valve stem caps on here. I like these to keep the mud, the water, and everything out of the hole here. Otherwise, everything can just get nice and sopping wet in there, and then your valve stem can rust off. I definitely recommend those. Next up here, we've got the Camel ADV skid plate here. This is sort of a piece of plastic, almost like a cutting board material, that runs all the way down the length of the back here and then actually extends to protect your rear linkage here. Highly recommend the skid plate. The only thing that I don't like about this plate is that the fasteners actually do stick off a bit. I think in the stock skid plate, the plate actually kind of hangs down and these are recessed in there, but this is definitely something that could get taken out. You can see I've got a couple chips taken out here and a scuff there. Obviously, if that would have happened here, that could just take the head right off. So that's not the greatest thing. I think if you replace this with something a little bit more low profile, probably would be completely bulletproof, but definitely provides some good protection. It actually offers you a fifth mounting point in the back here. If you look in your owner's manual, they'll actually tell you not to jack the bike up by the stock skid plate. They tell you to pull it off and actually support the weight of the bike by the sump here, which is just basically the bottom part of the motor that holds the oil. I think the reason that they're doing that is more or less just to cover their ass, but essentially the reason that they're telling you that is that the skid plate is normally only attached to these bars here, which are actually just bolted onto the foot peg brackets here. Obviously aren't going to provide a whole lot of support, but by adding that fifth mounting point in the back there, I felt much better about jacking the bike up by this. Now, I'm not telling you that it's okay, I'm not recommending it, I'm just saying it's what I did, and these bars seem just fine. And while we're over here, we'll take a look at the RNG case covers here. So I've got one on the other side that we'll take a look at in just a second. Basically, this is just going to provide a little bit of protection in the sense that this will absorb an impact a lot better than your metal case would. This can take a scuff, this can take a hit and kind of absorb it, where your metal case might possibly crack. Now, I did actually take out a bit of material here with the Dremel around the filler, because I found that the way that this was originally, it sort of cupped the fill plug here, and then you'd end up with little bits of dirt in between the fill plug and the outside of this case. And obviously when you take this off, those have really only one place to go, and that's into the motor. So I would recommend doing something similar to this. That seemed to me to be the best solution, but obviously kind of use at your own risk. Now this one on the other side here protects basically all of your case here, as well as the water pump. Now, it doesn't do any protection for your two coolant lines here. These are metal. This did always make me a little bit nervous. I always felt like there should be something protecting those, but I never really had any issues. Obviously, I guess if the bike went over and hit a rock here, you might be in trouble. Obviously, your crash bars can only do so much. Now, I never did anything with the foot pegs or the levers or anything like that. All that was just fine with me. I did try a set of lowering rear set brackets from J&S Engineering. With my boot size being a 9-10, I didn't really need that, so I actually ended up giving that to a viewer, and it turned out to work great for him. I think he had like a size 11 or 12 boot, and he said that was just perfect. Now, moving back here and kind of in the realm of protection, we've got the Camel ADV high exhaust kit. You do get a little bit of dirt down in there because of the angle that this thing is at. I've never actually had any issues because of that, but I think eventually you probably would end up with enough dirt down in there that you'd have to take that thing apart and repack it. Either way, definitely like the system. Sounds absolutely awesome. Now, the baffle is removed. That does make things a little bit quieter, but this was not above the 96 decibel limit for this area. So I definitely love that. A little pricey, but I think worth doing at least something for the protection factor. And if you guys aren't aware what I'm talking about, the stock pipe would normally come out here and then hang down somewhere in this area and hang out a lot farther than probably both this and the Dirt Racks bars that I've got on here. And it did not take long for me to tip the bike over on this side. And essentially what happens is the big long bracket that sticks off down about here to mount that exhaust to easily gets bent in, and if you bend it in and out too many times, eventually that's going to snap off. That bracket is welded to the subframe, which is welded to the main frame, so technically if that gets damaged or broke off, your bike really would be totaled by the insurance. So not something I think you should mess around with. I know people think it's a little odd that I didn't want to break that off, so instead I cut it off, but having that bracket be about half the size and having that exhaust tucked in was think absolutely necessary, and it's something that I definitely felt much better about once I had done. So I don't care if you do this, but I would do something to keep that exhaust from getting busted off. And not that I was really ever that worried about it, but when you get that bent in, it actually can scar up your swing arm. Because that's aluminum and the stock pipe was steel, people actually wear holes right in the side of the swing arm, which is of course not a good thing. But really my worry was always breaking that exhaust off and having to worry about getting it re-welded on. So definitely happy that I went that route. Now, like I said, these are the Dirt Racks bars. We've got a good mounting point up here. We've got a mounting point right there that actually threads right into the motor after it goes through the frame. Then you've got a cross brace here and kind of similar bracketry and mounting here attached to the frame and motor there, attached to the frame here. Definitely a good solid set of bars. These have taken quite a few hits, and I've never had an issue with them at all. Now, the racks on the back here are really meant to kind of hold the soft luggage. I've actually got a set of Dirt Racks luggage that came with these. Definitely good dry bags and worth looking into, but I really just wanted these more or less for the protection aspect. I like that they gave some protection to the bike and to my exhaust pipe, because even though this is in a better spot now, I still don't want it getting bashed around by rocks or anything. So I'm definitely happy with these, but probably the most useful thing about these bars, honestly, is that you actually have a place to grab, and you have a place to grab down low. You actually have a couple places to grab down low, which with a big bike like this, if you're somebody like me that is pushing the limits of these bikes off-road, you know, you're gonna have to hop off once in a while and drag the bike around, and having a place to grab is really kind of nice. I don't know that these ever really took too big of a hit, but any impact that they did sustain, I didn't notice any damage. You've got good mounting point here, mounting points there and there, which actually seem quite stout, surprisingly. Really nice thing about the Dirt Racks system here is that you can actually mount this up with their rear rack here. This is all covered in dirt because I used to have a medium tusk dry duffel on the back of it. Obviously that mixed with some sand and dirt being stuck under it for miles and miles and miles obviously wore some of the paint off. I think that's just going to happen no matter what type of coating you slap on it. This rack is not super sturdy, but that's really only because of the fact that they really just have these small mounting points here. So it's not really going to do a whole lot as far as protection goes. I have reefed up on it to move the bike around a few times. Not something I would recommend, but it has worked. Moving further back here, we've got the Camel ADV tail tidy. So this reuses your light and then basically just removes all the plastic and everything that's back here. Just kind of bolts up to the bottom and then sort of shoots out the back. They give you this license plate holder, which I highly recommend. I ran this without that for a long time, and it shook my plate apart and actually ripped it apart. This seems like probably one of the best tail tidies out there. The other ones, I think eventually, if you ride hard, will end up tearing off or breaking off or whatever. This, I know Camel ADV did a lot of testing with these before they released them. They had problems with other configurations, but this was the winning one, and if it stands up to the riding they do, I know it was going to stand up to the riding I did, and it definitely did that for me. Attached to that, both front and back here, we've got the Tusk signal lights. Definitely good lights, nice and bright. A lot of LEDs out there that you find are, even if they're expensive, are dim and don't really put off a lot of light and don't have a bright enough flash to actually get people's attention, which is obviously very important on a motorcycle. So definitely recommend those. Not super cheap, but not super expensive either. I know there's other options out there that you can actually pull off for trail riding, but these are small enough. I never had an issue with them. They were more than compact enough, and I was not able to run the little bracket that comes with the Camel ADV high exhaust kit, just because of the sort of teardrop shape that this is. Haven't had any issues with this melting. It seems totally fine. Don't anticipate any issues. I think the exhaust is just far enough away and directed in a way that it doesn't actually hit this that much, or at least not enough to warm it up anyway. Next up, we've got the seat concept seat here. This is about 7/8 of an inch lower than the stock seat would be, and as you can kind of see here, if I press down on the gripper top here, there is a bit of, I guess what you'd call a butt print here. So this has a little bit of a curvature that you can't see, and this is kind of pulled tight, but it is definitely a very nice, comfortable place to sit. Now, even though this is a bit lower than the stock seat, it's not as much of a help getting my feet to the ground as I guess I thought it would be. Now, I'm still definitely happy that I went with this seat because it really was a lot more comfortable. The stock seat, it kind of comes down at an angle at the top, and you sort of are kind of hanging over the sides all the time, where this gives you a nice, stable, comfortable platform to sit on. However, because the bike is so wide and because the seat sort of follows the width of the bike up here, it still ends up being so wide that it sort of kicks my legs out before they can actually go down. So if I slide off to the side of the seat a bit, this was helpful in getting me a little closer to the ground. But don't buy this seat thinking that it's actually going to get you an inch closer to the ground. It's probably more like a ½ inch if you're sitting in the center, maybe even less than that. Either way, I definitely recommend Seat Concept seat. After buying this seat and seeing how much more comfortable it was over the stock seat, I actually went and bought another Seat Concept seat for the other bike that I bought to replace this machine. Now, moving up to the front of the bike here, we've got the low fender stuck back on here. I put this on at the end of the season, last season, just to kind of do some testing. I had the big Yamaha YZ motocross fender on the Camel ADV high fender kit, which is this bracket up here. This essentially gives you a spot to mount a fender and also gives you a spot to mount these two individual brake lines, and then you've got a line that comes off the back that goes back kind of under the tank to the ABS module. This is definitely an in-depth install and seems like a lot of work just to get the fender up high, but initially I wanted to do this just because I was nervous about busting this fender off with the type of trails that I ride. I don't know if I would have busted it off. I think I probably would have at some point. Definitely liked the look of the high fender, but that YZ high fender did tend to catch the wind, and with the big long forks on here, the knobby tires, it did sort of make this bike ride a little wild on the highway. I don't really know if this helped at all keeping the bike clean. It didn't really seem like it, but it definitely made the bike handle a lot better on the highway. So I don't know. I'm definitely a high fender guy, but honestly, I really do kind of like the way that the low fender looks back on here now that I've got it on. I don't know what I'd recommend there, I guess. If you like the high fender, maybe look into a high fender kit. If you don't, you're probably going to be a little more comfortable on the highway. Obviously, you could put a smaller fender on the high fender kit, but then you're looking at less protection from the mud and water and stuff like that. So to each their own with that. Mounted to that bracket up here, I've got the Cyclops Adventure Sports lights and their bracket, specifically made for the Camel ADV high fender kit. These lights definitely seem to work pretty good. I've never had any issues with them. There's cheaper options out there. If you're willing to spend the money for something a little bit fancier with the wiring kit, look into these. Otherwise, I'm sure you can find something a little bit less expensive, and you'll just have to do your own wiring. But as far as plug and play stuff goes, these are excellent. And if I turn the key on, you see we've got the glowing ring here. That is, I think, a special option. And then these will actually kick from 50% light up to 100% when I flip the high beams on. Well, if the bike was on, that is. So that's low beams and high beams. Obviously not a good test, but I've got a video on that if you want to see how they work at night. I'll actually have a link down in the description for all of the install and review and test videos that I've done on this. This one I think I kind of forget about here, but behind the stock Radiator Guard here, I've got a black wire mesh radiator protector. This was also from R&G. I don't know that I've actually had a situation where this came in handy. If you put one on the outside, it does offer a little bit more, I guess, protection between that outer layer and the actual fins of the radiator. That one sticks really close. I was never a huge fan of that, but I figured having that there was better than nothing at all. Now moving up here, probably one of my favorite things that I did to this bike was the bar swap. So this is the YZ high bend Tusk Chub bar. And essentially the reason that I wanted to go with this bar is because the stock bars came back at such a straight angle, or I guess didn't come back at really hardly any angle at all. They're a really, really straight bar. So if you looked at them in this profile, they would essentially almost go straight across. And for me, with my width of shoulders and length of arms and everything, I would end up having to kind of crank my wrists in like that, and that got super painful after a 5 or 6 hour ride. I could not believe how much of a pain in the butt that was. It just, my wrists always hurt anytime I would ride the bike, and they would hurt after I'd ride the bike. So switching those out for these bars was ideal. I actually did try some risers to begin with, just to bring them a little closer. That really just did not do it. It helped, but it didn't really fix the issue. And then I had bars that were way higher than I needed. So I would say for me, and for anybody that's looking for a little bit more comfort for your wrists, the YZ high bend chub bar is definitely a good thing to try out. Attached to that, we've got the Tusk 1 1/8 fat bar handguards. These were definitely a good choice because they're nice and wide. They offer a good amount of protection. Definitely something that I highly recommend. Probably one of my favorite sets of handguards. Definitely inexpensive, but certainly not cheap, and definitely a good quality product to have. I did stick these shorty levers on here. Not really too much to say about them. I guess they look nifty. They're adjustable. Whatever. We've got the 717 Pro grips on here. Nice, squishy, comfy grip. Much better than stock grips. And then I've got the Tusk grip heaters underneath those with the switch VHB taped to the bottom side of the gauge cluster there. What else do we got here? We've got actually this 3D printed bracket here that I had to modify with a just Garmin Nuvi 40LM mounted in here with the VV mapping chip to show me all the ATV trails around here. That piece and the little bit of yellow that you can see in here, as well as the frame plugs here, are all from a company that honestly I'm not actually sure is still making these products. I'll have to double check. There'll be a link for all this stuff down in the description so you can check those out. This cover down here has a frog skin on it, which is super cool. Opens the intake up a bit. Definitely a good thing to look into if you're going to do an ECU reflash, which I had done by Two Wheel Dyno Works. Definitely fixes some sort of clunky issues with the fueling on this bike, and did seem to add a decent amount of performance along with the sort of wide open pipe and the more open air intake there. And then I've just got a foam washable filter in here that I used to replace the air filter. So I think that's it. I don't think I missed anything.
So as it turns out, I actually did forget something, and that is the Camel ADV anti-bobble head kit. Those are going to be the bars on each side of the GPS and the gauge cluster. Essentially what they do is connect the GPS bar down to the fixture behind the headlight. And essentially what that does is just sort of connects all of that and makes it a little bit less able to sort of bounce around and flex. Originally I had people that were concerned that that was going to endanger the gauge cluster somehow or wreck the headlight or something. It did absolutely nothing of the sort. If anything, I think it sort of stiffens everything up just enough to keep it from bouncing around too much, but definitely doesn't restrict it from moving at all or create any sort of hard buzz or anything like that. It's all still super smooth, and if anything, like I said, it's going to help that situation. It's definitely not going to hurt anything, and it certainly keeps that dash from bouncing around, reflecting the sunlight in your eyes, and basically taking your attention off of the road while you're riding. So I think it's a great thing to do, not necessarily something you have to do, but certainly a mod that I think is worthwhile if that's something that bothers you.
So I think that's it. That is my Tenere 700 build. We'll be going to my dad. Hopefully you guys will see it soon in some videos from him or when I'm out riding with him. But until then, I guess I'm not a Tenere 700 owner anymore. So thanks for watching, guys. Take care. Stay safe, stay swanky, get out, enjoy this beautiful world any chance you get, no matter what type of machine you've got. But if you can't get out and do that right now, here's some videos to check out in the meantime.